gentlemen, welcome to the last session of the 9th Z Jaipur Literature Festival's Charbagh. We are delighted to introduce our session, The Inner Life of Cultures. We have with us T.M. Krishna and Dayanita Singh. But before we begin, I'd like to make a few announcements. Please ensure your phones are placed on silent mode. And should you need to have an urgent conversation, please do so outside the venue. Also, we'd be grateful if you could give up your seats for those who may not be able to stand. And please keep the aisles free. This is for your own safety. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our speakers for the session with a huge round of applause.
Can you come closer? Yeah. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm very excited to be here with TMK on stage talking about culture, and I see from his dress that he must have thought a little bit about that as well. But that apart, you are this incredible musician. I'm a fairly
incredible photographer.
No, well, you know, I'm an artist and we're at a literary festival, and obviously the first question is, why are you here? And the thing that I'm sure you hear a lot of, and I heard that you heard it quite recently, is your core competence, Mr. Krishna, is singing. You are such an incredible, gifted artist. Why do you write a book? Why do you write a column? I'm sure you hear that all the time.
Almost every day, actually. I'm always asked that question. I was asked that question day before yesterday in IIM Bangalore, where a professor got up and said, your core competency is singing. Why are you speaking about these things? And that seems to bother a lot of people. I think the fundamental aspect that is being lost in all this is, I think our core competency is to be a human being.
Right.
Is to actually respond to that which is around us, that which is within us. And this idea of what we are good at or what we present very well is only a way of reflecting who we are. And the more we ask that question about that field or that process, then there's a possibility you express yourself in so many other ways. And core competency is, first of all, who defines that? Who really accepts that you have a core competence of anything? So I really believe that this thing is highly overrated, that somebody is good at something and therefore they should do only that. I think the whole idea is being good. And then there are many ways you can come across speaking about it, writing about it, singing about it in your own way. For example, I'm asked the same question by writers. Why is this guy writing? It's not just a musician who is asking me why you're writing. The writer is asking me why you're writing. The journalist saying, why should he write about politics? What does this guy know? Has he been on the street? Has he gone to the by-lanes of Bihar? So, but the fact is, the journalist is doing exactly what I'm doing, which is responding to the environment within which they exist and they hope to place themselves. So I don't see a problem in it as yet.
I find it very amusing that you and I are invited here, and actually we are both authors. We could talk about your book, we could talk about my identity as a bookmaker, but we are here to talk about culture, an inner culture. Now, why is it in India when we say culture, how can we just think about Festival of India kind of culture, which is music, dance, art? It's a very limited understanding of culture, of course, but we keep falling into that again and again. We get a lot of that as artists outside India in all the regional shows, no?
Yeah.
Region-based shows, Indian artist, Indian woman artist, Indian woman epileptic artist, Indian woman epileptic short artists. It just goes on and on and on. Everybody's desire to box you in. You, sir, are such a good singer. Why, for God's sake, are you writing? What made you write that book?
Well, yeah, I've said this before and I'll say it again.
Please do.
That whether I write about music or whether I write about anything else, or where I speak about, it's the music that is my window to life. And when I say that, what do I mean? When you sing, or when you even listen to music or experience art, there is an experience of life itself. And the more we explore that experience, the more the experience offers you a way to look at yourself. So for me, fundamentally, the book itself was a way of questioning what I believed was my culture. I mean, I grew up in an upper class, Brahmin, English speaking, well, like I said, somewhere I had all the attributes to be in that whole realm of talking about these things in the Jaipur Lit Fest.
Yes.
Okay? In terms of where I was born and how I grew up, the kind of language I speak, all that fits in perfectly. So I grew up there. I believed that there was a certain system I learned, and it was a very important system. I started singing Carnatic music, and what it gave me was what I was, and everything about it was for me a certain treasured purity. And in some way that was also transferring itself on me. Now, just look at my attire, and people will think they could think two things. One is, look, say somebody who's protecting our culture. Only because I'm wearing a dhoti and I'm coming here. I think that's as bizarre an idea as to think of, or to think of me as some kind of a specimen who among a lot of people here is standing out. Both are problematic. And I think that when I wrote the book, it was about trying to figure out why I was singing. Why was I so sure that this music that I was transferring, that people were applauding to, was the best thing I could do? Everything about that music, everything about the internal experience I was offering myself and the people in front of me had to be questioned. Because I did believe, and I still do believe, that there is a lie hidden in that we refuse to look at. That there is a trap hidden in the experience that I believe is so wholesome, and there's a trap in the experience that I sell to the person sitting in front of me. So unless I ask the question on what is this experience itself, and is the experience itself limiting, what culture am I talking about? What am I branding as culture? So, you know, when people think of a Carnatic or a classical musician, they somehow think that they've understood Indian culture. I think this word Indian culture is bunkum. Actually, it's total nonsense. There is no Indian culture. There are different cultural clubs, and each club is very happy about itself, and it perpetrates what it believes is important to be perpetrated among the group that it is within. Now, if I was going to throw that back at you, I mean, you're a bookmaker. That's a ridiculous term. I mean, let me be very honest. That's a ridiculous term. What do you mean a bookmaker? You don't write a word, and then you put up, shall I say, a museum of books. The photograph somewhere is not the focus, if you can say that. It's about a form. So, and for me, you're an alien. I'll tell you why. You know, I'm being very honest here. Why you're an alien to me is, to me, coming from the form that I come in, and I want to say something. We may be talking about forms, but what we say goes beyond these forms and goes into how we look at ourselves. So for me, I am in a way representative of tradition. I am representative of this land. I carry with me 2,000 years of legacy. I don't believe that, but I'm just telling you what is believed. And I carry with me a certain essence. And which is why if you meet any classical musician in India, they don't like the word innovation. They kind of feel very uncomfortable about that word. They'll say two things. One, they'll say whatever I've done has already been done before. Or they will say it is only an extension of something. They will very rarely use the word innovation, because innovation is connected with the idea of being modern, is connected with the idea of losing something old. In the mindset, I'm not saying it's real. So for me, you're that. You have no tradition, as far as I'm concerned. You use technology as the basis. And even if I use technology, I don't think technology is what I am. I'm beyond technology, actually. So the microphone just happens to be there. It's the essence that is behind. So how do you place yourself in this cultural idea?
It's true. I think photography is a very young medium with a history of maybe 170 years. And unfortunately, even that becomes a tradition. Photography is tremendously bogged down by ideas of what it should be. And my problem with photography after all of these years is actually it clarified itself when you were at a lecture you gave about sound, where you were talking about how there might be musicians or listeners who get hung up on just the lyrics, because you know that's a world we know, and we are not necessarily responding to the larger sound, and the lyrics maybe get in the way. Well, for me, the factuality of the photograph, the fact that the woman with the camera was standing next to the mic is a fact. How do I go beyond that? How can I make something else out of it? And that is only possible to me if I start to listen to the sound of photographs. And that's when
At this point, people think you're cuckoo.
That's the problem of photography, because actually it's a very limited medium. We don't have enough questions. I am trying to say we need to do tonal editing.
So what do you mean by that?
I mean, I can't sing it like you, but there's a body of work. When a work develops, I have a tone in my head. For when I was doing the Kochi work, okay, I will tell you, the Kochi Biennale work, I had Kavawa playing continuously on a loop. And I let that music just go into the inside. Everything else gets shut out. I even put on headphones, or the music is very loud, day and night, day and night. And then I get the tone for the work. And then I edit with the tone. So the moment I get an off note, I decide whether I want the off note or not. So I have freed myself from the content.
Okay.
And I am trying to see. It's an experiment. I might fall on my face. But can one experience the sound of a series of photographs? Can it become more than the lyrics? Can it become more than the words? And I think the only way that is possible for me to do that is to go into literature with a lot of depth, to really try to listen to as much music as I can. Photography is very young, and maybe that is the advantage of photography, that it's just these 170 years, tiny, tiny history that you can read in Jeff Dyer's book over a weekend, and that's it. And then what do you do with photography? But the fact is, photography is the alphabet now. It's the note. It's like sa re ga ma pa. That's it. Everyone can say it, but how do you make music out of it? That's the challenge. And there I feel we have to pay attention to other mediums, especially photography, because it's such a young tradition.
No, I'm glad you brought this up about other mediums, because that's very important, I think, even in the context of what you could call traditional art forms. The fact is two things. One is the idea that the form that I practice is, first of all, very, very old, is a lie.
Right.
It's a big
Actually,
lie.
that's true.
It's a big lie we have sold for a long time, and we'll continue to sell. This form is only about 150, 200 years old. Not too much older than photography.
Oh my God.
Now, has there been ideas, concepts around for more than 1,500 years that have moved, that have been influenced, they've been deleted. Yes, they have been. But this idea that we present as Carnatic music, or for that matter even Hindustani music, is an idea that is not very old. But then we keep saying it's old. So the justification of what it is today comes from the word old. So that is how it is used. Now, the point that you said about other forms, you know, it's also true that the classical artist, in general, musician, hardly has any connection to any other form.
Well, tell me about it. I've been telling people who ask me to write recommendations to go to photography school, do an MA in literature, and then think about photography. Then you bring something to it. Otherwise, you're just a photocopy machine.
So it's very similar here. So
In music
in
too?
music it's very similar, in classical music especially. And I use the word classical only because of, so that people can understand it, because I have serious problems with the framing of that whole classical folk kind of divisions. But the fact is that the idea of classical music is self-contained. We talked about clubs in the beginning. I want to bring that back here.
Exactly what I'm underlining.
Okay. So, because the idea is that this is a self-contained, satisfying club.
Yeah.
And in the club exists a certain idea of what it is, how it should be experienced, and how it should be received. And we all play that game very, very well. Now, the counterpoint will be, I don't agree with you. There has been so many changes. People have sung, for example, ragas that have never been sung before. There have been more complexities, which is true. But let's look a little deeper into these aspects. In my perception, these are difficult and important things. But have they asked fundamental questions of the experience itself? They have not.
Because
None of
it's a
these
club.
do not ask fundamental questions on whether building these changes on a fundamental idea itself needs to be revisited. So we don't ask that question and we keep the club intact. And this club clearly has an insider-outsider. The other problem in this is with art, it's very easily made to be this great internal experience, and the word spiritual comes in so quickly, devotional, religious, and I'm not going to argue that, because that is for you to experience, and if you experience at all, and if you don't, doesn't make you a lesser human being by any reach of anybody's imagination. But by saying that, you're doing another fraud that we have to acknowledge. The moment you raise anything to the frame or to the pedestal of being divine, there cannot be a discussion about it, is what you're actually saying. If you say spiritual, how am I going to discuss that with you? It's completely spiritual. So, while it may be internal and very, very deep, we cannot forget that the foundation for that experience many times is built on a social political interaction, and sometimes abuse of that socio-political interaction. And we have to see how that, so how can you justify, or how can you, shall I say, separate yourself from, in my case, an upper class, upper caste, male club, and I use the word male club as an idea, not in terms of a gender of a person being a man or a woman, the idea of the male, from the idea of a deep experience that the art gives. I see both actually playing into each other. In fact, the real experience of art gets further limited because you are building it on socio-political disturbances. And there's another example I use, and I like to bring that here. It's a musical example. For any musician, the idea of riyaz, practice, sadhana, is sacrosanct. The moment you say riyaz, everybody thinks of this. I know the imagery of riyaz. The moment I said riyaz, I know all of you had this imagery of this guy lost, you know, in music, in this little room, probably in Kolkata. I don't know. I'm just trying to create the ideal. And with two tanpuras behind, you know, that's also a load of nonsense. Okay? In the sense, riyaz happens in so many frames. It doesn't happen only in those frames. It also happens in the bathroom. And I'm very serious. It happens, some of the best ideas actually jump out in the shower. Even for a musician, not just amateur, by the way. So, during that riyaz, I'm sitting with my teacher. Just imagine that. And my teacher teaches me a line of music, and we go on with that line of music again and again and again and again, and it becomes some core part of me. At that point, you will say it's a completely internal experience, separated from everything that's constructed outside. Probably true. But can I escape from the possibility that that line of music has been constructed in that way because of a certain social point where a previous line was corrected and made this way in order to erase a certain tradition of music that rendered it differently? For example, if there was the Devadasi community sang a certain line of music in a certain fashion, I come there and through my tradition cleanse that out, and then that line is taught to me by my guru. That line is not just a philosophical internal experience, it's a political social commentary. Now if I don't acknowledge the truth behind that, what is this soul searching we are talking about, what is this experience we are talking about? So we are actually playing clubs, and within the clubs we play games.
And what is the best mode for propagating the club?
Well, there are many ways that I actually wanted to shoot a question to you, and can we come back to this? Because I want to bring the idea of the male club, especially in terms of photography.
Yeah, I spent all my years so far saying, no, this is photography is an area where it's not about gender, it's not about gender. But you know what? Now that all the hair is white, I can say it's really a boys' club, and it's a club. People don't want to hear more than what they are all happy doing. So if you start to say, why do you want to print your photographs on flex and hang them outside a tent? Because we want people to see them. But do you understand the medium? Do you understand that media? Did you make work to make it like on flex? No. So photography is become, there isn't much discussion there, and technology keeps changing, and the burden is that it's such a technological medium that the boys club is constantly discussing the gadgets. You know, how big is yours? Mine is bigger. So obviously we don't get to the idea of actually discussing the club. And then the festivals, we are in the middle of a huge club. This is the literary festival. So I think I've just realized that actually to really be an artist, and if you want to get out and do something, you have to be willing to walk away from the clubs as you have done. And you walked away from the festival that...
Yeah, I happen to walk away from the famous December Carnatic festival.
Why?
Well, actually, the festival itself is only a symptom, as far as I see it.
Yeah.
But you can ask me then why do you walk away. I'll try and explain it to the best of my abilities.
Because I want to understand at what point do you decide to leave the club and why?
Okay, because like any festival, including this one, how you come here, what you expect here, how you want to discuss it after 1 year is the same every year. It is a repetitive idea of what you will carry. It's not a judgment of how anybody spoke, but it's a judgment of how you experience this festival. So I just wanted to go a little deeper into the idea. Okay? Not about, last year we had better sessions than this year. I mean, that's like saying somebody sang these ragas better than those ragas. That's going to always happen. But the idea of what you receive here, the idea of why you come here, the idea of that experience that you want to hold becomes a repetitive idea. The exact same thing happens with the idea of culture, and in my case specifically the idea of the December season. The problem exists because the form, we never discuss form.
Exactly my problem.
We never discuss form. We only discuss that which builds a certain tower over the form.
Yes.
So we are all on that tower and looking at everything down. Now, if you discuss form, I am talking about the fundamental idea of music, the fundamental idea of what is an experience of a performance, The fundamental idea is, if I say I am singing this raga, what am I doing? The moment that question is asked, one, it shakes you up because you suddenly feel what you have done is not wrong. And I want to say, by the way, it's not about it not being beautiful or not. That's not what we are discussing. We're discussing something a little more. It becomes a problem for you because you realize you've been holding on to things that make you comfortable.
Absolutely.
So I felt that this December season or this December idea was a comfort idea that reiterates who I am, reiterates who the audience is. And let's be honest, we love to speak to audiences that we know will applaud. We love to sing to audiences that we know will applaud. So one of the things that I think I like to put myself through is to interact with contexts and people in various ways where I am most uncomfortable.
So you put yourself out of your comfort zone.
Completely, because it does two things. One, it reveals yourself to yourself, but it reveals your idea of art. I mean, for example, your exhibition Hava Mahal. You know, you should, because it's very interesting. These are not the hoity-toity Delhi people say, oh, Dayanita, that was so beautiful, right? But these are people who are coming there to see the Hava Mahal. You're an incidental happening.
True.
I think that's fabulous. We should all make ourselves incidental. And the moment you make yourself incidental, you see that all the stuff you thought was important was crap. So even when you're incidental, what is it that core, that art form or that whole idea retains? That is what we are looking for. And so when we talk about culture, you know, like I said before, there is no one culture. I think that is a lie. And first of all, to think these words, you know, that syncretic culture, we have always been a syncretic nation. Cultures have always been in conflict. Within the conflict has been sharing. That's the whole beauty of how we have existed. The point of saying we were syncretic is to say that something happened in between killed that. So what we are trying to say is actually talking about outsiders again.
Yes.
And we do the same thing in form.
And in our clubs.
Exactly. I'm saying it's the same takeoff on what we will do within the art form. We will say it was always so beautiful. Then the microphone came and then everything got bad.
Now,
What
TM
can the
Krishna,
microphone do? Nothing.
But now TM Krishna has come. So he has ruined our long-held idea of the kacheri.
Oh, exactly.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've not yet killed it because there are so good enough people singing it quite beautifully. And I don't intend to destroy
not.
it in any
No,
fashion.
of course
It's only,
not.
for me, these are only questions. These just absolutely just
Exactly.
questions.
So what is the point of these clubs and festivals if we are not going to ask those fundamental questions?
Absolutely.
This is my problem with photography festivals. It's all my prints are this and my prints are that. That's not what it's about. Photography now is alphabet. Everybody in this room with a mobile phone has a camera on their phone and takes images and makes photographs. Then what does it mean to be a photographer? What does it mean to have that profession? If we're not going to ask questions of how photography is viewed now, and we continue with the print and the mat and the frame as the idea of a photograph or a festival on Flex, where have we moved?
You know, can I just extend that point? You know, we are talking about the abstract in some sense, right? So let's extend it to the idea of culture. You know, let's just extend it there. You know, when you generally ask somebody, what is your culture? Say you come from my kind of background, then you really don't have an answer. So you will be told about going to the temple or dressing in a certain fashion or celebrating certain festivals or respecting certain things. Those are the literals.
Yeah.
Right? Those are literal behavioral things. Just like there are literals to music and there's literals to photography.
Tell me
right?
about it.
So just like you discussed the non-literal in art, is there something abstractive about this idea of your land? For example, there's something we all say. We travel abroad, we come back, get out of the plane, and we say, I can smell my place. We never say it stinks, even if it does. And I think that's an important experience because that smell is not a definitive thing. It's not like it smells like something. It is not like But there is a something that connects you to that land, to the context, which is abstracted when you say, when you come to the country. It's not just nostalgia, it's not about your family. Your family may not even live there. Your friends may not be there. But yet there is something that you feel. That is culture. That is the land. How do we keep in touch with that quality? Once we say that, this idea of tolerance, intolerance, and I find the word tolerance very, very problematic. Primarily because it immediately rings the word of intolerance with it. It almost exists only because intolerance exists, otherwise you will not use the two words. I think what we should talk about is not intolerance, but fear is what we should talk about.
Fear of change.
Fear, exactly. Fear of finding who you are beyond going to a temple, beyond wearing a dhoti, beyond wearing whatever, beyond praying, beyond. Fear of finding who that is. So it's fear, it is anger, it is bitterness, is what we are dealing with. And this is exactly what we deal with when we ask questions of an artistic form. In a way, an art form is a window to the way we are, which is why we are bestowed upon this value of being cultural representatives, because we just provide a window. So all that you see as us as different communities in the conflicts is there when the music is playing. The music, by the way, does not make that disappear. We think it makes it disappear. No, 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 no. Music is playing the conflict. The music is playing the problems. So how do I go beyond that musically is as much an important question as I say, how do I go beyond these superficial cultural contexts to understand what is that smell that makes me feel this is an important, and that smell has not got to do with the geographical boundary, it has not got to do with a religious context, it has not got to do with a caste, and it has not even got to do with gender. So what is that? And can the artist capture that? So I find it fascinating when you talk about tone in a photograph or editing with a tone. Because I'm just wondering, what is it that you're placing there? Because you're talking about two things that will I see the tone?
You will not be able to hear the tone, but you will see that something holds these 88 images together. When we go to Havamel tomorrow, you'll see that there are 88 images there that are made over a period of 30 years, content-wise all over the place, but tight like that, so tight that you can hang them in any order and they'll still work together. That's because I had now really understood tonal editing. To understand, once I understand it, then perhaps I may fail. You might hear the sound of all of those images together. I don't think you will hear it in one photograph, even though I think in your cover image it's there. Actually, for those of you who've seen or haven't seen, do look at TMK's paperback edition. It happens to have a photograph of mine. It's a photograph that is technically, sorry boys, out of focus, underexposed. You know, I don't know why HarperCollins chose this picture. I certainly didn't present it to them. I had just put it on my Facebook page. I think they chose it because I had one of the most magical evenings of my life in the company of 3 friends in Sadanand's house in Chennai. And I made just one image. I was trembling and sitting next to another friend and we were holding hands. And I made one image just to prove to myself that this had happened. So of course the image is out of focus. But I do feel that something must have translated. There must be something that the publishers that people might have heard or sensed from this photograph, which is not about the factual quality of the photograph, because the factual quality is all out of sync. So I think one can get to a point where one can hear the sound of images, and that could become a way of editing work. After all, today making photographs is just TMK like collecting notes. Sa, ma,
Well,
right?
Yeah, if I can just translate that into
Yeah.
my form, it is like giving a performance.
Right.
The form of the performance is fundamentally fixed.
Yes.
The
Ditto that.
technology used to present that form is fixed.
Ditto.
The experience that that form will give
Oh
is
my
also
God.
fixed. So when all this is fixed, where is art? So that's fundamentally the problem. So this is so when we talk about societies, when we talk about cultures, when we talk about inner workings, we are talking about going beyond this basic construction. So I think the anger comes and the hatred comes from the fact that these things that we hold on to defines in our mind who we are, you know. Now when these questions are asked that ask you, I think this is not who you are, is a very problematic thing for a person to experience or accept.
But essential to walk out of the club, essential to go for a walk, preferably alone.
I mean, for example, you know, Aruna Roy and MKS's, their members were attacked some time ago here in Rajasthan. Now, why do these acts of violence happen? They are not just about political parties or politicians. They are about, again, the idea of culture. See, another thing, this whole idea of politics and society is actually only the top layer. It is the culture that is the problem. The idea of who we are, that is a fundamental problem to the way you will ask a political or a social question. So if this attack has happened because there's a cultural issue, and the cultural issue is asking fundamental questions of identity. And we have defined our identities based on superstructures which we have built. Now, do I have time?
Yes, plenty.
Okay. Another thing, you know, you should bring in is, I think even within the world of arts, the hierarchies that are in operation. For a long time, I very rarely expose myself to any other art form. This is the truth. I believe that I was singing the most complicated, universally difficult kind of form, which if I had internalized, gives me the ability to sing any other form, receive any other form, critique any other form, and everything else was a poor sister or a brother, musical or otherwise. So I very rarely actually went to listen or watch any other form. And when I say that, I went to the space, but I never listened or watched. I was actually processing my own idea of music when something was going on. But the most interesting thing happened when some years ago, we watched what is known as a Kattai Kuthu performance in Chennai. And
What is it?
Kattai Kuthu is a theatrical dance music combined kind of a theatrical presentation. So dance, music, and there's drama. Stories are usually mythological from Mahabharata, etc. And they are usually practiced among the lower caste groups in certain regions in Tamil Nadu. By the way, it's a flourishing art form, because the moment I say Kattai Kuthu, everybody's saying, oh, nobody is practicing. No, no, no. Tons of people practicing it. You go to their festivals, there are hundreds of people listening and watching it. There are two things about it that struck me. One was my first encounter. When this performance ended, I watched it like, what is going on? What's the big deal about these men in these outfits going around, round, again, belting out dialogues? And then a little child from the audience asked the main performer a question about their leg movements. And he said there are 64 varieties of feet movements. And when I heard that, I was shocked that I was not sophisticated enough, I was not sensitive enough, even though I believed I have learned one of the most sophisticated, subtle forms, to see the difference between even 3 leg movements. To me, they all look the same. So what does it say? 1, about my receptibility. 2, about my idea of what the form was. And then after a few years, I went to the village where the school is, and I sang there. And after me, there was this performance through the night. I stayed for about an hour. There were about 500 people there who knew exactly what was going on every second, and I had no clue of what was going on. It was like everything was in German. What does it say about my ability to understand sophistication? These people there were so sophisticated, they were so cultured. So look at the kind of observational problems I've created. It's a class, it's a caste, it's an artistic problem. And how can I believe that this does not affect my idea of my own art and my perception of other? So how do you not combine? You know, the next thing is, the next immediate commentary is, you know what you should do? You should do a combined performance. And that actually is a greater vulgarity, and I'll tell you why. Because that is like saying, oh, poor thing, they don't get the kind of people who come to your performance. So if you're on stage, these people sitting in front of me today will also get a chance to watch Katte Kutte. Katte Kutte then will become a far more accepted form. That is a greater abuse of the situation. The point is, how do I place myself within the aesthetic body of Katte Kutte, and from there look back at the aesthetic body that I am as a Carnatic musician? And what does it then say? This is exactly what every one of us need to do as human beings of the other person. And then these words of conflict will really not matter. Not that there will be no differentiation or there will be no differences. There will be. But your understanding of that will change from levels of just practice to levels of experience. That bridge is what art should do. Your photograph must sing.
Absolutely.
And the singer must be part of a painting. How can that really happen?
I think it can happen. It has happened. It happens when you study other forms. I know for me, a lot of my editing ability really comes from reading Michael Ondaatje, who I think is the master of withholding, listening to fantastic singing, because you know when to stop, no? You don't even, you are famous
Hopefully.
for not, you're not famous for not even completing the concert, right?
Thank you very much.
But I had to bring that up in my own defense, that you know when to stop. That's what one needs to know in any art form, but also in photography.
I'm just going to add a caveat over there, because this when to stop is also used in a different sense. In performance, we use it in the sense of when you've got that audience to that high, you stop. That's not what we're talking about
No,
here.
no.
Yeah.
No. In fact, you have to stop way before that.
Exactly.
Because that's very easy. Come on, we both know how to do it. You know how to get the claps, I know how to get the claps. One is not interested in that. It's really to try and see how this music of your music and my music, how is it reaching anywhere? And I must admit that this time at Hawa Mahal has been quite a humbling experience, because people are coming there to see Hawa Mahal. They come inside, they take a selfie or two in front of the pictures, and then they say, "Chal yaar, hum to Hawa Mahal dekhne aaye hain, ye kya black and white tasveerein dekhenge yahan par," and they're out. And equally, there are people who say, "Hame malum nahi tha photography mein itni udasi ho sakti hai." So each to their own. Yeah. But I feel it's so important for me to go out of the gallery, to go out of the museum, to go out of these systems that have been set up for our art forms and explore other places. Might fall on my face, that's all right. Is that something you think about?
I completely agree, because I want to give you an example and also add another point to this. One of the things that we tried doing, a group of us, is to try beginning an art festival in a fisherman's colony in the city of Chennai. There is the famous Chennai beach. Walkers walk that beach every day. They go to a corner and they walk back, and nobody knew beyond that corner was a little kuppam called Urur Olcott Kuppam, which existed for a far longer time than the idea of Madras. So with a couple of friends, we got together and we started this festival. And I think it was a fascinating experience. Why did we do the festival? For multiple reasons. One, is there a way to create a stage or the sands of the beach where multiple art forms present themselves as what they are and to audiences which will not usually respond to the form. So you had Carnatic music being sung to the fishermen. You had what is known as parai, which is a kind of a drumming tradition, where the Brahmins of Besan Nagar experienced it there. They all sat on the same sands, they all ate the snacks out of that little trolley that was in the corner, and they all experienced art. And the artist, the Carnatic musician, came there, I'm sure, with discomfort, because it is not an audience that you know will understand what's going on. So what do I do? Of course you're uncomfortable what to do. And then you had the artists of Kute having audiences that they would not see. So it was a very interesting, I think, coming together of people of lot of discomfort and comfort. You had the fishermen saying, oh, what are these going on? Ah, total rubbish, you know.
Right.
And I'm glad they said that. So this is not an evangelical process. I think we should say that. This is not trying to evangelize everybody and say, convert them into being great appreciators of Carnatic music. Rubbish.
That's not
It's
going to
also for
happen.
them to say this music is nonsense. How many of us within the Carnatic world actually hear somebody saying Carnatic music is nonsense? We don't hear it, right? How many people within the world of writing hear people say the whole literary world is just a bubble of people who want to feel that they are important and they are intellectual and they can understand something beyond the word? Anybody you hear saying that, you will say is uneducated and not sophisticated enough.
True.
We will all say that. And let's be honest about it. So all this is rubbish. So this was a very interesting experience. And there's another thing I want to add here. Another thing I've been told is, why is this guy wanting to go and give Carnatic music or classical arts to an audience that's not asked for it? That's a very interesting observation.
Yeah, like the municipal schools.
Yeah, it's a very interesting observation. So the point was, they saw it as a demand-supply idea. If there is a demand, provide supply. So it is actually economics is what we're discussing. So when there is no demand, why are you trying to supply it? So in a way, are you trying to force something? But this is not a demand-supply issue. There are two things here. One, what happens to human experience when people experience something that they may even hate but never had an opportunity to hate? Have you given the fishermen the opportunity to hate Carnatic music? You have not. You should. That's very important. Similarly, what happens to the musician who goes to an audience that may not like it? And very important, what happens to the art in the process? That is the fundamental idea. What happens to the idea of the art form itself? Does something dramatic change to it? Or there's an interpretation come? Are there perspectives that we would never dream exist that suddenly come? Are we able to assess that inner self of the art, which can exist even in the fisherman's village and can exist me singing here or me singing at the Carnegie Hall? That doesn't make a difference. Those are the questions, and those are cultural questions, not artistic questions.
So we're talking about conversation.
Yep.
And we want to have wider conversations. We need to have wider conversations. And actually maybe now we'd like to include, oh, okay, lots of hands. Like to include the audience in the questions, in the conversation, sorry.
This is quite a good segue